My sister told me to leave my father's house before the funeral flowers had even wilted. She was standing in the middle of his living room, holding a folder against her chest and looking at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. "You've had enough time," she said. I looked at her. Enough time for what? To accept that the house is mine. There were 6 people in the room: my sister Claire, her husband Mark, my mother, my father's longtime attorney, Mr. Harrison, my father's executor, David, and me. Nobody spoke. I looked around the room. My father's old recliner was still beside the window. His reading glasses were still sitting on the armrest. A half-finished crossword puzzle was still on the coffee table. He had died 9 days earlier, and my sister had already decided I was no longer part of the family home. She opened the folder. Dad left the property to me. I nodded slowly. Okay. She seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't argued. Your apartment is only 20 minutes away. I know. You can take your things tonight. My mother finally looked up. Claire. My sister turned toward her. What? Maybe this isn't the time. When is the time, Mom? She looked back at me. We all know Dad wanted me to have the house. I looked at Mr. Harrison. He didn't say anything. That bothered me, because my father had spent the last 6 months of his life telling me something completely different. Not about the house, about a promise. A promise he had made 23 years earlier. At the time, I thought it was just another thing fathers say when they know their children are worried. I didn't realize he had written it down. I certainly didn't know there was a clause in his will that would make my sister regret telling me to leave. But 9 days after my father's death, none of us knew that yet, and my sister was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. She smiled at me. Take whatever is yours. Then she pointed toward the hallway. And don't touch anything else. I remember looking at the family photographs on the wall. There was one of my father holding Claire when she was 6. One of me sitting on his shoulders when I was 4. One of the 3 of us at the lake. And suddenly I realized something. My sister wasn't just asking me to leave the house. She was trying to decide who belonged in my father's life after he was gone. She was about to learn that she didn't get to make that decision. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old. Claire is 41. And for most of our childhood, she was the responsible one. At least that's what everyone believed. She got good grades. She went to college. She married Mark at 28. She bought a house before she was 35. She had a successful career in commercial real estate. I took a different path. I left college after my first year. Not because I couldn't handle it, because Dad got sick. He had a heart problem that nobody initially thought was serious. Then one afternoon, he collapsed in the garage. After that, everything changed. Mom couldn't drive at night. Claire was living 3 states away, so I came home. I took a job at a hardware store. Then another job repairing industrial equipment. I drove Dad to appointments. I picked up his medication. I sat with him during the nights when he couldn't sleep. I learned how to change the filters on his oxygen machine. I learned which medications made him nauseous. I learned how to make the coffee exactly the way he liked it. I didn't think any of that made me special. He was my father. You take care of your father. That's what I believed. Claire saw it differently. Whenever she came home, she would thank me. At least at first. Then the comments started. You don't have to sacrifice your whole life for him. I can help. You should think about your future. I knew she meant well, but eventually the comments became something else. You've gotten comfortable. You're 34, Daniel. You can't keep living like this. Sometimes I wondered if she was embarrassed by me. Maybe she was, because whenever her friends visited, she would introduce me as Dad's caretaker, not her brother. Not Daniel. Dad's caretaker. I never corrected her. I didn't care what people called me. Dad did. He always did. One evening, about 6 months before he died, we were sitting in his kitchen. He had just finished dinner. He looked tired. Daniel. Yeah? Do you ever regret coming home? I laughed. No, not even once. No, not even once. No. He stared at his coffee. You gave up a lot. I didn't give up anything. You gave up college. I can go back. You gave up your 20s. I still have my 30s. He smiled. Then he became serious. Your sister thinks I'm going to leave her the house. I didn't know what to say. I know. Does that bother you? No. That was true. I didn't want the house. The mortgage was almost paid off, but it needed repairs. The roof needed replacing. The basement flooded every spring. The property taxes were high. Claire loved the house. I thought she deserved it. Dad looked at me for a long time. You're too willing to give things away. I smiled. Maybe. No. He shook his head. That's not always a virtue. I didn't understand what he meant. Then he reached across the table and put his hand on mine. Promise me something. What? If your sister ever tells you that you don't belong here. He stopped. Don't believe her. I laughed. Dad, I'm serious. I know. No, you don't. He squeezed my hand. One day you'll understand. That was the last serious conversation we ever had. 3 weeks later, he died. The funeral was on a Saturday. It rained the entire morning. People came from 3 counties. Dad had been a mechanic for 45 years, but everyone who knew him called him the man who could fix anything. He fixed cars, boilers, generators, farm equipment, marriage problems, according to Mom. He never charged neighbors for small repairs. He'd say, "You'll pay me when I need you." Nobody ever understood that. He wasn't talking about money. After the funeral, Claire hosted everyone at the house. She had flowers everywhere, food on the kitchen counters, photographs arranged in frames. She looked like someone organizing an event. I spent most of the afternoon in Dad's garage. I found an old wrench he had given me when I was 12. I held it in my hand, and for the first time that day, I cried. Claire found me there. "You okay?" "Yeah." She looked around. "Did you find something?" "No." She nodded. Then she said Dad would want us to be practical. I knew what was coming. The will. She nodded. "We should talk about it." "Not today. We have to. We have to." I looked at her. "Tomorrow." She sighed. "Fine." The next morning, she had already made copies. That should have been my first warning. At 10 o'clock, everyone gathered in the living room. Mr. Harrison had been my father's attorney for 27 years. David, the executor, sat beside him. Claire sat next to Mark. Mom sat in Dad's chair. I sat on the couch. Mr. Harrison opened a black folder. "Before we begin," he said, "I want everyone to understand that this is the final executed will." Claire nodded confidently. Mr. Harrison began reading. "My mother received a modest monthly trust. Mark and Claire received several investment accounts. I received Dad's truck, his personal tools, and his workshop equipment. Then came the house, the residence at 14 Willow Lane." Claire straightened. "Claire straightened. Is to be transferred to Claire Bennett." She looked at me. Not triumphantly. Worse. Sympathetically. As if she was sorry for me. Mr. Harrison continued. There were several smaller assets. Then he closed the folder. Claire smiled. "That's it?" Mr. Harrison looked at David. David didn't answer. Claire laughed. "I told you." She looked at me. "Dad wanted me to have the house." I nodded. "Okay." She frowned. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." "Why?" "Because he told me." That changed her expression. "What did he tell you?" "That you were getting the house." She relaxed. "Exactly." Then she stood. "Which means you need to start moving your things." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Claire." She turned. "Yes, I haven't finished." She stared at him. "You said the house was being transferred to me." "I did. So what's left?" Mr. Harrison looked at David. David reached into his briefcase. He took out another document. Claire's face changed. "What is that?" David placed it on the table. "It's an addendum." My sister laughed. "To what?" "The will." Silence. Mr. Harrison said, "Your father executed this document 11 months ago." Claire looked at me, then at Mom, then back at the attorney. "Why wasn't I told?" "Because it was a private testamentary instruction." "What does it say?" Mr. Harrison didn't answer. He looked at me. And for the first time since Dad died, I felt something I couldn't explain. Not fear, not relief. Something closer to recognition, like my father was about to walk back into the room. Mr. Harrison unfolded the document. "The residence at 14 Willow Lane is to be transferred to Claire Bennett." Claire smiled again. "See? But..." The smile disappeared. Mr. Harrison continued. "The transfer is subject to the following condition." Claire leaned forward. "What condition?" He read the clause slowly. "Claire Bennett may retain ownership of the residence only if Daniel Bennett is permitted to remain in the home for a period of 5 years, rent-free, and without restriction on access to the garage, workshop, and family records." Nobody spoke. Claire stared at him. "What?" Mr. Harrison repeated it. 5 years. That's insane. It's legally binding. "No." She stood. "Dad wouldn't do that." Mr. Harrison looked at her. "He did." Mr. Harrison looked at her. "He did." "But he left me the house." "Yes." "Then it's mine." "Yes." She pointed toward me. "Why does he get to live here?" Mr. Harrison answered calmly. "Because your father wanted it that way." Claire looked at me. "You knew." "No, you knew." "I didn't." "Then why aren't you surprised?" I thought about Dad's words. "If your sister ever tells you that you don't belong here." Don't believe her. I finally understood, I said. Because Dad told me not to believe you. Her face went white. The argument lasted 40 minutes. Claire said the clause was unfair. Mark said it was bizarre. Mom cried. David stayed silent. Mr. Harrison explained that the clause had been reviewed and properly executed. Then Claire asked the question that changed everything. Why? Mr. Harrison looked at me. I think Daniel deserves to hear this. I sat up. What? He opened another folder. This isn't about the house. He removed a letter. Your father wrote this the day he signed the addendum. He handed it to me. My hands shook. I opened it. The first line said, Daniel, if you're reading this, Claire has probably already told you that the house is hers. I almost laughed. Dad knew. He knew exactly how this conversation would go. The next line said, I don't want you to fight her for it. I kept reading. I want you to understand why I made the decision I did. My throat tightened. Your sister believes you gave up your life for me. That's not true. I stopped. I read it again. Then again. Dad continued, you didn't give up your life. You invested it in people. I looked down. I couldn't read anymore. Mr. Harrison waited. Claire was crying. Not quietly. She was crying the way she had at Dad's funeral. But this time, I didn't look away. I kept reading. Your mother and sister think the house is an asset. For you, it is evidence. Evidence that the years you spent here mattered. And I need you to have access to it long enough to decide what comes next. There was another paragraph. Then one sentence. Do not let anyone convince you that taking care of your family made you less successful than them. I put the letter down. Nobody spoke. Then Claire said very quietly, he never wrote me anything like that. I looked at her. I don't know. She shook her head. He always believed you were better. No. He did. No. He did. No. I looked at her. He believed I needed something different. She wiped her face. What's the difference? I thought about it. Maybe he knew I was already trying hard enough. She looked away. There was another document. This one was the secret. David placed it on the table. It's not part of the will, he said. Claire looked confused. What is it? A trust agreement. For what? David looked at me. For the workshop. I frowned. The workshop? I frowned. The workshop? Dad's garage wasn't just a garage. It was the old building behind the house. He had repaired equipment there for years. After he got sick, I started doing the work. I knew every machine, every shelf, every tool, but I never thought it was worth much. David explained, your father purchased the property behind the workshop 20 years ago. I nodded. Okay, do you know what it's worth now? No. $2.3 million. Claire stared at him. What? David continued. Your father never developed it. Why? Because he was waiting. For what? David handed me another document. It was a letter from a developer. They'd wanted to buy the land. Dad had refused. There was a note in his handwriting. Not until Daniel is ready. I stared at it. Claire stood. You're telling me Dad left him $2 million? No. David shook his head. He left him an option. What does that mean? It means Daniel can decide what happens to the property. Claire looked at me. And I get the house? Yes. She laughed. A strange, bitter laugh. Then why did Dad make everything so complicated? Mr. Harrison answered. Because he wanted you to have what you valued. Claire looked confused. And Daniel? He wanted Daniel to have what he built. I looked toward the garage. For the first time, I saw it differently. The old workbench, the cracked concrete, the shelves, the machines. All the years I had spent there, Dad hadn't been waiting for a buyer. He had been waiting for me. That night, Claire came to the garage. It was almost midnight. I was sitting at Dad's workbench. She stood in the doorway. Can I come in? I nodded. She walked inside. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I hated you. I looked at her. She started crying. Not because you did anything. She wiped her face. I hated you because Dad trusted you. I didn't answer. I thought everything you did for him was proof that he loved you more. He didn't. I know that now. She looked around the garage. I never understood why you stayed. I smiled. I did. What? Stay. She nodded. I know. No. Stay. She nodded. I know. No. I looked at her. I mean, I understood why I stayed. She waited. Because it was Dad. She sat on the old stool. I wish I had stayed more. I didn't say anything. I should have come home. You came when you could. Not enough. Maybe. She looked at me. Do you forgive me? That was the first time she'd ever asked. I thought about it. I don't know. She nodded. I understand. But I'm trying. She smiled through her tears. That's enough. 5 years passed. Claire kept the house. I stayed. Not because I was trapped, because I chose to. During those 5 years, the workshop changed. I repaired it. I added new equipment. I hired 2 apprentices, then 4. Eventually, we turned the workshop into a small restoration business. People brought old farm equipment, classic cars, industrial machines, things nobody else wanted to repair. We did. The business grew, not quickly, but steadily. Claire became a partner in the property development. She turned the house into something Dad would have loved. She planted a garden, repaired the porch, restored the kitchen. She even kept his chair by the window. Mom visited every Sunday. Mark eventually started helping with the accounting. And somehow, the family that had spent years competing over who had succeeded stopped competing. The 5-year clause ended on a Tuesday. I remember the date because Mr. Harrison called me that morning. Congratulations. For what? You're officially free to leave. I laughed. I wasn't aware I was imprisoned. Your father was very precise. I looked around the workshop. I think I'll stay. There was silence. Then he said, I thought you might. A week later, Claire gave me an envelope. What is this? Open it. Inside was a photograph. Dad, Claire, me. We were standing beside the old workshop. I was 12. Claire was 15. Dad had one arm around each of us. On the back, Claire had written, maybe he wasn't choosing between us. I looked at her. She smiled. Maybe he was trying to teach us that there was enough room for both of us. I looked at the photograph again. She was right. Dad had never wanted one of us to win. He wanted both of us to understand something neither of us had been mature enough to see. A family isn't a scoreboard. Success isn't a house. It isn't a job title. It isn't a college degree. And it certainly isn't the ability to inherit the most. My sister thought she had inherited everything. She had the house, the investments, the accounts, the property. And for 9 days after Dad died, she thought that meant she had won. Then the executor read one secret clause, and everything changed. But the strangest part is that the clause wasn't really about me. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about giving my father enough time to say something he hadn't been able to say while he was alive. He wanted me to know that the years I spent caring for him were not wasted. He wanted Claire to understand that being successful didn't make her a better daughter. And he wanted both of us to stop measuring love by what someone left behind. I still have Dad's letter. It's in the top drawer of my desk. Sometimes I read it. Not because I need reassurance anymore, because I don't. I read it because there was one sentence I didn't understand when I first saw it. The last sentence. It said, one day, Daniel, you'll realize that the thing I left you wasn't the land, the workshop, or the money. Then he wrote, it was the freedom to decide what your life means. For years, I thought my sister was the successful one. She had the degree, the career, the house, the confidence. I had the workshop, the old truck, the bills, the responsibility. And I thought that meant she had gone further than I had. I was wrong. Because success isn't always the thing everyone can see. Sometimes it's waking up without regretting the person you've become. Sometimes it's knowing you showed up when someone needed you. Sometimes it's having enough courage to stay when leaving would be easier. And sometimes it's having a sister tell you that you don't belong in your father's house. Dick it Smallin. Only for your father's final words to remind you that you were never there because you have nowhere else to go. You were there because you belonged. And that was the one thing my sister could never inherit.